everybody. Welcome into the Volquest Tuesday podcast here at Volquest.com and on the Volquest YouTube channel. As always, please like, subscribe to the Volquest channel. Awesome Price, Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs. I am Eric Kane. Got a lot to discuss here today on this Volquest podcast that is brought to you now by Exterior Home Solution, a great company, Austin, that we are thrilled to be partnering with.
Yeah, Jeff, Dustin, they all do a great job. If you need a garage build, you need a new roof, which is what they really are specialists in. If you need siding, they do a little bit of everything at Exterior Home Solutions, and give them a call and get them out for an estimate, or if you want to try, like I said, if you're needing that new roof, it's that time of year where you can get a new roof before we get to those summer storms. So a great time to kind of get a jump start on some of those things you need done at your house or around your house.
Yeah, we got plenty to discuss here today. It's been a rough 2-week span for Tennessee basketball this past week. Back-to-back losses at the buzzer. How will this team respond? The Oklahoma and Texas are coming to the SEC in 2024. We discussed this a little bit last week about the mixed reports, but they are coming July of 2024 to play football in the SEC. And with that, there will be a new scheduling model, and so we're going to discuss who we want to see Tennessee with those permanent opponents. But first, Brent Hubbs, a Tennessee icon, has passed away earlier this week through the night on Sunday night at age 99, a true VFL in every sense. Gus Manning has gone home, and as Austin Price tweeted out earlier this week, he's doing the locker room at the pearly gates.
What a legend. What an iconic career. He is Tennessee. Everything about Gus Manning is Tennessee. And prayers to his family and his friends. And I tweeted this as well. I mean, if you were a friend of Gus Manning's, you were family. You were a part of Gus's family. And just a treasure. I don't know really how else to say it. An unbelievable storyteller, Rob Lewis. I mean, you would find yourself on media day during football weeks back in the olden days. You just kind of gravitated over to his chair, and you kind of hoped that Bud Ford might be late getting that press conference started, because there might be another good story or two coming out from the great Gus Manning.
Man, Hubber, I tell you, I mean, when I really got to know Gus, and one of the things that I really treasure about this a lot of work was way back. Buzz Peterson was still the basketball coach, and I mean, Gus used to have that office down in Thompson Boyd Arena, which was a little cubby hole, which was just like a time capsule. I mean, you can find something, you can find a pin that General Nealon wore in the 1958 Gator Bowl or something, to sit on the desk or whatever. But I used to pop in there and visit with Gus, at least once a week for 20 or 30 minutes during basketball season, during practice, before practice started or something. And didn't not claiming to have gotten to know him well, but I got to know him, and was really, I mean, it was a very rewarding experience. And I mean, you talk about just a walking treasure trove of, I mean, he could just drop, some line nonchalantly, and, it would be a little slice of Tennessee history, about, General Nealon kicking the Orange Bowl trophy or the Gator Bowl trophy through a window at Ponte Vedra, reliving an extra point kick or something. And just, I mean, just can't say enough about. I mean, you summed it up. I mean, I'm reiterating, but just he was an absolute treasure. I mean, some of the stories, some of the best stories you can't tell, but there's a million of them. I mean, they involve, Bear Bryant, Elvis. It's like 6 degrees of separation with 20th century pop culture in Tennessee with Gus Manning.
And for me, I was lucky enough, in his later years when he was still living at home, to go over and do a feature on him, and the fact they'd get together every Monday night and play cards. He and a bunch of the people from sports information, the athletic department, who would have helped out over the years, they'd get together with him as he's getting older, just to kind of keep him reinvigorated about things. And the biggest thing I can say about Gus Haywood, that generation, they were characters, and they were characters from a standpoint of they had personality. They grew up in a generation, and not to make Eric feel young here, because this is not my intent, but Rob, Brent, and I, we grew up where we called people on the phone. People don't call people on the phone anymore. They text, they Snapchat. I think you lose some of the personalization with today's generation of person. But I think he just had such a such a personality, and continued to have that later in life. I think that you just kind of learn to appreciate that. And I did tweet that, Eric. You're right. I mean, he and Haywood were so tight. Gus always needling Haywood. Those two are kind of back together, and that just kind of feels right.
When they recorded the locker room at WIVK, when they came in, Gus came in with nothing. Like, he had no papers, he had nothing. And basically Haywood had a loose script to kind of follow for the locker room. And Gus just ignored it. He just talked about whatever he wanted to talk about. And it would drive, Haywood in a fun way. It would drive him crazy, because Gus there was no script with Gus. Nothing said script with Gus Manning and anything that he did. Two of my highlights with Gus, my two of my funnest memories, stories, hangouts with Gus Manning, is I was on the back of a bus going from Chicago City to South Bend, Indiana, for Tennessee had landed. They had a walk through, and they were going to their hotel, or vice versa. I don't remember which direction we were going, but it was on a trip to Notre Dame. And I'm sitting in the back of a bus, and it's one of those buses in the back 2 rows that had a little table there. And you sat there, and it was Gus and Haywood, and they were sitting across from each other. And it was like an hour bus ride, I guess, 50 minutes, something like that. And they told stories for 50 minutes. And like, it was one of those things, like, everybody sitting around, nobody spoke. Like, nobody was wearing headphones or earbuds. Nobody was, trying to do anything else. They just sit and listen to those guys tell stories. And I wish I'd have recorded the conversation. It was just a historical lesson, talking about, Heisman trophies and runner-ups and John Majors, not winning the Heisman Trophy and everything. It was just fantastic. And then following the 98 championship season, Tennessee goes to Washington, D.C. to meet the president, but they didn't go until August for scheduling conflicts. So Tennessee went up in the middle of 2-a-days, and the university wanted obviously some publicity for it. So they let three or four media people travel with the team up to the White House. And so Gus is on that trip. And so it's hot. Coach Fulmer's bothered by the fact that Tennessee's going up there in the middle of fall camp, and, they're going to go sightseeing or whatever. He was ready to meet the president, shake a hand, and get back, because the timing of it was not very good. So we go and we meet the president. They go through the line. You meet the president. You do all that. Get on a bus, and we're heading back towards the airport, and they stop in to the Jefferson Memorial. Well, I've seen the Jefferson Memorial multiple times, and obviously Gus had. And a bunch of us didn't get off the bus. And we just kind of sat in the back of the bus. And we're sitting there waiting, and Gus, just out of the blue, turns to me and goes, "Hey, boy." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You remember all them scrimmages we had back in the preseason?" And I said, "Yeah, Gus, I remember those." And I won't say exactly what he said, but he basically said, "I thought we was going to be a really crappy football team. How in the world did we end up at the White House?" And it was just classic Gus out of the blue on a day of celebration. And we just sat there and cackled and laughed, because that team in the preseason couldn't score a point. Nobody thought they were going to be any good. It wasn't Gus picking on anybody, but it was just kind of that surreal moment where Gus, unfiltered, just laid out what all of us were thinking. It's like, how in the world did Tennessee find a way to win the national championship? And that was Gus. And Gus was always had a story. He always had a smile. And he always had time. That was the other thing. Gus always had time for you. Maybe it was 5 minutes, maybe it was 30 minutes, depending on what your time schedule was. But he was never in too big of a rush to ignore you or to walk past you or to not say hello or visit with you a second. He always asked you how you were doing. And I always appreciate, being a young guy. Here was this icon, and he was willing to spend some time. He and Haywood both were willing to spend some time and teach you some history, just stuff you don't read in books, right, Rob? I mean, just stuff you're not going to, the media guide doesn't tell the story. The box score doesn't tell the story of some of those things. And those are the memories that I will treasure, getting to hear those stories from those two guys.
Same here. And Haywood's been gone for a while now, but got to know him not as well as Gus, but it was just hard to really appreciate how much Gus had seen and experienced, and how far back he went. This is my last one. It's doesn't have anything to do with Tennessee, but it tells you just kind of gives you a sense of just how much Gus had lived through. I remember him telling me he bought one of the first houses in what you would call West Hills, behind where the Knox County Public Library is
that's
now.
where I went.
Paper mill area, across from P.F. Chang's. For people that are familiar, over Bearden Hill is the big point here. And he told me a story about telling General Nealon where he had just bought his first house and was moving to, and the general told him, it's like, good God, Gus, you're moving all the way out there in the country. and it's literally off the paper mill exit, over Bearden Hill now. I mean, that's how long. Gus was. I mean, I wasn't here then, but I imagine that really was farmland at the time.
Who knew you and General Nealon would have the same perspective, Rob?
Exactly.
You go past Krispy Kreme, Rob thinks going to Montana.
That's pretty far.
I live in Hardin Valley, and I constantly get needled about, did I have to stop and spend the night at Cedar Bluff on the way home? And all these
or AP, I've got to go to Turkey Creek. Can I stop and spend the night at your house?
Spend the night, yeah.
Well, it was. I mean, in the later years, it was tough for Gus and Haywood. They notoriously did stop in Lenoir City and take a nap on
a book tour,
Chattanooga on their book tour at one point. They got tired on the drive out of Knoxville and took a rest in Lenoir City. But just, again, I mean. 99 years, what a life to live 99 years and to experience everything he experienced. Not just with UT Athletics. Rob said it best. I mean, he's hanging out with Elvis when Elvis is playing at Stokely. I mean, just every iconic figure and moment that came through Knoxville that put on a concert or a show of some kind, Gus had the opportunity to not just see it, but to be around it and to talk to people. And so many people, he taught the business on how to do it and how to treat people the right way. He will be greatly missed, but hats off to 99 years of a great life.
Anybody that knew Gus, and my thing, he much like myself, didn't have much of a filter and would just say what was on his mind. And I love that about him. I just think that, again, character. That's the word for me with Gus Manning.
99 years old. What a life! A ball for life in every sense of the phrase there. And I mean, he was watching Tennessee basketball up until just, I mean, seeing tweets and seeing stuff out there on social media just a couple of weeks ago. Saying, hey, Tennessee won by 3, rooting on Josiah Jordan James, all that good stuff. So, a legend, and it's been really cool the last couple of days just to hear more stories about the life that he lived. So, thoughts and prayers for his family, but a Tennessee legend, and that is Gus Manning. All right, let's shift gears here, Rob. It was a disastrous week for Tennessee on the basketball court. Back-to-back losses at the buzzer, most recently to Missouri, in a game where Tennessee trailed by as many as 17 in the second half. Claude fought its way back. Tyreek Key had a great game. Tennessee got a 6-point lead there towards the end, but Missouri wouldn't go away, and some critical things had to happen down the stretch, and they all happened Missouri's way, and they threw out that prayer, and it went in. Where does this Tennessee basketball team go from here, and kind of what's the mood around that program right now?
I mean, the mood is surprisingly upbeat. I mean, we're taping this a little bit before I'll be over there to see Coach Barnes and the players this afternoon, but that was the biggest surprise to me on Saturday afternoon was how upbeat the head coach was. But for me, from my perspective, I mean, they're in trouble. I mean, they're in trouble in regards to where they were 2 weeks ago. I mean, they're ranked number 2 in the country. They're in the conversation for a number 1 seed. Everybody has them penciled in to play in Greensboro, which is a nice, juicy little first-round site, if you're Tennessee. Now they've lost 3 of 4 and are very realistically, or should be realistically, worried about being a top 4 seed in the SEC tournament.
Especially with the next, 3 games.
Yes.
And we had this discussion on our version of the locker room Sunday night, and I just think the Alabama game is the most key because you got to protect home court. It's going to be the toughest because Alabama's playing so well, but you've got to protect home court. If you can win the game midweek this week and then just steal one of the two on the road, whether it's at A&M or at Kentucky, going 2-1 in that stretch would be pretty good. And again, that gives you another tier 1 win over Alabama. But I'm with you, Rob. Like if you end up in that, you having to play a day earlier than you thought you were going to in the SEC tournament, I think that's a rough patch. Now, I do think the best thing coming out of this 2-game losing stretch here is that Tyreek Key seems like he's gained a little confidence, found a little confidence. And to me, he can be a tipping point for the basketball team, especially if they get Josiah back this week. If he can continue to give them between 2 and 4 3-pointers a game and be a real threat and a consistent threat, I think that changes things, don't you?
Oh, big time. I mean, and he doesn't need to, like you're saying, just couple 3-pointers. He doesn't need to score 20, but if he could be a consistent, reliable, double-digit scorer, I think it's really big for this team because let's face it, that's been their struggle all year long is scoring. I mean, it'd be preferable if you could have a big guy that you can rely on night in and night out. But I mean, I don't think that's happening. So any place that can find a spark on offense is big, but I mean, not a great place right now. I mean, you got health concerns. You've lost 3 or 4. You pretty clearly are not playing as good as you were, 2-3 weeks ago, and you're getting ready to play your toughest 3 games of the conference season.
Rob, back to Key for just a second. Was his play? He played really well. Was that a benefit of the fact that the 2 teams Tennessee played last week or gave up the most points defensively of anybody in the league coming in? So there's more open opportunities for him. Was he hunting his shot more? Did you sense that he was different? And I know everybody's cautious about anybody, quote, turning the corner at this point, but did you feel like there was something different with Tyreek, or was that more of what the defense kind of gave them because those 2 were not great defensive teams in Vanderbilt and Missouri?
Well, I don't think you throw that out the window. I mean, I think you have to take into account that, Missouri and Vandy legit are probably the 2 worst defensive teams in the league, and Tyreek just, had his best 2 games. But at the same time, however, I thought he was a much different player. I mean, I really thought you could see it at Vanderbilt and in the second half against Missouri. Now, it wasn't there in the first half. I mean, he had halftime with 2 points and just taking a couple shots. But second half against Missouri, absolutely. I mean, will it carry over? I mean, you'd like to think so. I mean, a guy just throws up 21 points in 20 minutes. I mean, that's no joke. I mean, he was as hot legit as anybody I've seen outside of Chris Lofton on that court for 20 minutes. I mean, everything he was throwing up was 5 3-pointers in one half is a pretty big deal. Yeah. Not a lot of guys can do that.
Yeah, so, unfortunately, it got overshadowed. But yes, yeah. You're right. You're right. The other thing too is, I mean, everybody was bragging on this backcourt, 3 weeks ago with Zakai and Santi, and they certainly have not become bad players. Where do you think they are mentally? I mean, Zakai's had foul trouble the last 2 games. I mean, 3 fouls in 1:27 down the stretch by Zakai Ziegler. That's just not very, very good basketball. There's nothing that says heady basketball about playing that way. And then obviously Santi's had the 2 missed opportunities at the free throw line. Where do you think those guys are headspace wise?
Man, I think Zakai will be just fine. I mean, that little dude is just, you can't be any tougher than that guy. But I mean, you're right. I mean, to see him, with a kid who I think has a really good basketball IQ to make those plays late in the game in the final, 2 or 3 minutes to commit your 5th foul 85 feet from the basket in a game like that. And that, I mean, I that's something he just can't do. And I'll be surprised if he's not better for it. Santi, I mean, how about we've seen him hit a bunch of big shots. We've seen him go to the foul line in those situations and come through. I have to think it's a fluke, but I also have to think it's, something he's got to negotiate mentally and get past. Because we haven't talked to him, and I don't blame Tennessee. I wouldn't have read about in front of the media either after that on Saturday. But I mean, you have to think it's a mental hurdle that he's got to get past. I mean, to literally have 2 games in the palm of your hand, and when you've done it so many times before, that exact situation, and to come up short, I would have to think that that's something that he's struggling with right now.
Yeah,
Not
that
just for
first free
Sakai.
throw was about that first free throw he missed was about an air ball, Eric. I mean, he shot it about 14 and a half feet instead of 15 feet. He barely grazed the rim on that deal.
Yeah, it did not look good. And Rob, I was going to ask you not just for Santi, but a question that I've seen asked and a little bit over the last week and especially the last couple of days since the Missouri loss, but not just for Vescovy, but for this team overall. Are they kind of in their heads right now? Is it one of those things? And I feel like a little bit of that could be human nature. I mean, but you got to move past it. But seeing the way they've lost the last 2 games at the buzzer so late, especially after that comeback and all that, is this something to where they're playing a little too tight? They're not confident in themselves. And if so, I mean, I feel like it's never going to get better until they move past that, especially with Alabama coming to town.
Yeah, I don't think they play tight, EC. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not in their heads, but I think they play with a lot of confidence. Something is. I'm not saying that that there's not stuff. They're not struggling mentally right now, but I don't think they go out there and play tight and press. I mean, I think teams have kind of got their number right now, and if they're playing without Josiah and Julian, that's a big deal. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that Missouri, scored the most points anybody scored on them this year and shot 50+% with Josiah on the bench. I mean, I think that's significant. And if they're not at full strength, these next 3 games are not going to go well.
Well, kind of at the time of this recording, to the best of your knowledge, kind of where is Tennessee with those guys in the injury front?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, we're recording this before we go to practice this afternoon, where we'll get a lot more answers. With Julian, on Friday, it didn't seem like a big deal at all. Last Friday, with the hip thing, because we were in practice, it was open, and he shut it down afterwards, but it wasn't remotely obvious that he was going to struggle with it like that on Saturday. And Josiah, I'm just guessing here. I'll be surprised if he plays on Wednesday.
We had him out for the locker room, Rob. He had just come from 3 or 4 hours of treatment. He was coming to the locker room. He was getting some Japanese food. He was going back for more treatment. So, he told me, he's like, I'm doing everything I can to be able to play this week. He was moving around again. That's not cutting. That's not running. He was moving around, somewhat fine. I think you're right. I think I would call it up in the air. I think there's probably a little better chance now, based off talking to him, than maybe they thought, exiting the Vanderbilt game. But yeah, I think it's still very much up in the air.
Yeah, and everybody, we're taping this on Monday, so don't take this as like we're reporting injury news. I mean, I'm just guessing, and
right.
So so is AP. I mean, we're not.
Well, and I think the interesting thing from the standpoint too of, you're thinking this week, because Rob, you want to avoid, you want to get the double bye if you can, but also, I mean, you're a tournament basketball team. Now you're playing for seeding at this point, but you're a postseason tournament basketball team. You don't want to take on any chances of putting somebody out there prematurely to where it's a nagging, aggravating injury, in postseason play. And that's something that I think you have to consider and look at if you're Tennessee. I'm not saying you hold him, but I'm just saying I think you have to be careful, don't you? Because I mean, you got to have Josiah Jordan-James, for the NCAA tournament at 100%, and whatever it takes to get him there, that's where you got to go. If that means you're drop a line on the, drop a number on the seed line, I think you'd give that up to have him on the floor for you to make sure he doesn't re-aggravate the ankle and it'd be problematic for him in the postseason, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and Tennessee does a good job with that. And their training staff, their strength and conditioning folks are excellent. And obviously, I think, and I don't mean this flippantly, they have a lot of experience with Josiah. I mean, he's a guy that clearly is, they have a good read on. I mean, I think physically he's a guy that they have a lot of experience with. And yeah, you want him out there for Alabama, but you also, you don't want him out there for 10 minutes and, he tweaks it again. He's out for 2 weeks.
Well, for Tennessee, they got their work cut out for them here this week. Of course, we'll go to Thompson-Boling Arena on Wednesday, take on Alabama. Then we'll hit the road in Lexington on Saturday to take on Kentucky, trying to ride the ship. Lost 3 or 4, 2 at the buzzer.
I mean, you have no idea what you're going to get with Kentucky. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be That's going to be fascinating to see what happens.
Exactly.
And I think internally the big question for me is how does this team handle close game situations down the stretch, right? I mean, how many possession by possession type games have they been in this season, Rob? They've lost the last two they've been in, but how many times have they been really in that situation all year long down the stretch like that? So how does this team kind of get there? I think is the big picture question for them the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, again, maybe I'm naive, but I mean, the bigger concern to me right now is health. Is getting Julian and Josiah back, because mentally, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just not taking it seriously enough. Mentally, I think they're going to be fine, and I base a lot of that on talking to some coaches on Saturday, seeing how the players were in the media room after the game. And you guys know this. This is a head coach that if he feels it's warranted, he'll throw any and everybody under the bus, and there was none of that on Saturday, which again makes me feel like I'm not at all into moral victories or anything like that, but I just feel like they'll get better from this weekend, and they're playing. I guess probably by the time this is released, probably the number one team in the country on Wednesday night. So it might not matter that they sing "Kumbaya" in the locker room before the game, but I think they're going to play two good games this week. We'll see what that looks like.
I said it on the locker room Sunday. This team, it won't surprise me at all if they sweep this week. It just won't, just the kind of making all the hands or all the fans pull their hair out. I actually think the fact that they're not a fringe one or whatever, I think that helps them. I don't think this team was going to be built to have the pressure on it. If they lose a few and kind of go under the radar a little bit, I think that probably helps this team a good amount heading into the NCAA tournament.
We will see what Tennessee basketball looks like this week. Again, Alabama, 7 o'clock at TBA. That's on Wednesday. On the road at Kentucky, 1 o'clock on Saturday. 2024 is shaping up to be a monstrous year for college athletics. You'll go from 4 teams to 12 teams in the college football playoff. The Big Ten is adding USC and UCLA. ESPN is now going to be the sole TV provider of the Southeastern Conference. And now we know for sure that Texas and Oklahoma will be in conference for the 16-team SEC football season by 2024. We discussed kind of what scheduling model we would have in mind on last week's podcast. It's going to be either a 1-7 with 8 conference games or a 3-6 with 9 conference games. But it looks like it's going to be a 9 conference game, so that 3-6 model. The question I have for you guys here today is, if you were making the decision, what 3 permanent opponents would it be for Tennessee? I think we can all agree that it would likely be Vanderbilt and Alabama, but that number 3 team is the one that's kind of up in the air right now. Austin Price, kind of what direction would you go in? Which would make the most sense? And do you think it'll happen that way in terms of that third team you're going to say?
Well, I think that the conference is tasked with trying to balance things out. And inevitably, that's really a losing proposition, because you're inevitably going to have teams that are upset. Like Auburn, their biggest 2 rivals are the best 2 teams in the league. So that's a blow that you're playing Georgia and Alabama every year. Welcome to Tennessee's schedule for the last forever. It'd be interesting to see who they throw them a bone with their third team. Is it a South Carolina? Is it a Vanderbilt? What do they do? Is it Mississippi State? As for Tennessee, everybody's going to lump Kentucky in there as the third team, and I see that. It probably makes the most sense. But I could see them also throwing a South Carolina in there as well. But it just makes sense. Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Alabama for Tennessee. But again, when they're trying to balance this stuff out, Hubbard, there's no exact science. Now, if Tennessee were to get Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Alabama, then I think that's a real win compared to other teams in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think Greg Sankey's out there saying that, they're going to try to protect some things, but understand too that doesn't necessarily mean that every rivalry is going to be protected. So what does that look like? We'll have to see. I don't think there's anything about divisions. I think divisions are definitely going away, and I think it's going to be the 6-3 ultimately, because, Rob, I don't think there's going to be enough schools who are going to say, hey, let's play an 8-game schedule. I think TV and everybody involved there is going to say we need a 9-game conference schedule. So I don't think an 8-game schedule is a remote possibility.
I mean, how could you not, Brent? If you have a 16-team mega conference, how could you not play another conference game?
Oh, I agree.
Totally.
I know some schools have said they don't want to do that, but I don't think that's going to matter what they want to do on that one.
Yeah, I don't blame them. And if I'm ESPN and stroking the check that I'm stroking for the SEC, I want more inventory. I want those 9. I want everybody playing 9 conference games. And it's like Eric said, if you're expanding the league, it just stands to follow that you're going to expand the number of conference games you play.
Greg Sankey, go ahead, Austin.
No, go ahead, Eric.
Greg Sankey appeared on ESPN Radio Friday morning, kind of after this news was public later on a Thursday night, and said they hope to kind of have a plan moving forward, 8 games or 9 games, 1-7, 3-6, permanent opponents. Kind of hopes to have all that resolved by the time the spring meetings get here in Destin on Memorial Day weekend. That way you can kind of start making some plans moving forward. It'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. Rivalries are a big part of it, Austin, as is geography, as is equality. But at the end of the day, too, you're going to play every team in the SEC once every other year. So that's already improvement. If you're here for 4 years, if you're a student athlete, you will have gone and played in every single SEC stadium by the time you leave. I think that's incredible. That's awesome. But hopefully there'll be a direction by at least Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, and that would make sense. You've got to kind of get this over the next couple of months, and start moving in that direction. Again, I think it's a big win for Tennessee because you get Georgia off the schedule. They're the best team in the league right now, and you've had to play, again, the top 2 every year for the last several years. And so to be able to get them off, and you only play them every other year, you only go to Athens once every 4 years. To me, that's a real win. Again, you're not going to lose everybody. The whole 1-7 model where Tennessee gets Vanderbilt and and that's it. Like I don't think that was ever going to happen. 6-3 makes the most sense. And again, what does Tennessee's look like? But I think that for some of these league teams, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how it is spaced out, because what's Alabama look like? Tennessee, Auburn, and then who? Is it LSU? If that's the case, that's 3 pretty tough ones for Alabama. Nobody's going to be crying for the Tide, but like how does the conference try to balance the scheduling out? Because I think it's fascinating, because inevitably I think you're going to have a few people that are like, whoa, that's ridiculous.
Here's the other question I got, Rob. How is this not basically already done? Like you knew these 2 teams were coming, whether it was 24 or 25. You knew this. So I'm not saying it's some big conspiracy, but I don't know that there's going to be this big push through March and April. Maybe there is to finalize it, but should they not be a ways down the road? All of this stuff.
I mean, they should, but I just think it's really contentious. I mean, I just think you got a bunch of presidents and ADs and who are scared that they're getting the short end of the stick and really want to see it all late. I mean, I'm guessing. I mean, I'm speculating that people want to make sure that they're not the losers in all this. Like AP was talking about, what if Alabama? If you present Alabama, well, it's Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU. I'm kind of whoa, no. And if it's Tennessee, if Tennessee has Alabama, Kentucky, and Vandy, I mean and I'm just throwing. I mean, I'm sure there could be 15 examples like that out there. I mean, I just think you have a lot of opportunities for people to think that they are getting the bad end of the deal, and we all know that that's going to cause arguments at that level.
I think the real loser in this deal is Kentucky, especially Mark Stoops, who's got that nice contract where getting to 8 wins not real hard. All of a sudden, you had a 9th conference game. You put Jeff Brom at Louisville. Getting 8 wins gets a little more tougher.
Maybe he's not going to Starkville every other year.
For Stoops, no doubt. I mean, and even then, you just add that extra conference game, and inevitably, I mean, I've seen some of the mocks and stuff. I mean, like you start looking at it, even with Tennessee getting Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Alabama, you start looking at who they're going to play on a year-in, year-out basis, and it's like, man, I mean, it's like A&M, Texas, Oklahoma, and then on the other year you got Georgia, Florida, like LSU, like Auburn. I mean, like it'll be more exciting for fans. There'll be better road trips. There'll be more frequent road trips. But the path for everybody will be way more difficult, and especially a team like Kentucky, who has been feeling like they're on the fringe of getting to Atlanta. However, funny that is to some fans.
Yeah, they better schedule Georgia Tech.
Hey, Rob, do you remember, kind of on your point there, remember the 2020 season? And we were all just so happy to have football, first and foremost. Thankful for that. #blessed. But, I mean, that scheduling, that they had to redo the schedule and all that. And was it Arkansas that it was murderer's row? And it's like, how in the world is this fair? And then you see the powers that be protect Alabama and Georgia with that all SEC schedule that season. Like, the uproar at that time, when we were just so happy to have football, it was just so minuscule compared to what this is going to be like written in stone, and this is going to be the thing moving forward. So I agree with you there. I mean, they're trying to just be, in my opinion, they're trying to be so precise and careful and trying to think this out through all avenues to try to make it equal for everybody.
It's impossible.
Yeah,
it's not. I mean, it's not going to work. I mean, somebody is going to be mad, and you just have to. It's like, I mean, it's just the way it is. There's going to be a fan base mad. There's going to be a coach mad. There's going to be an AD mad. I mean, there's no way you can take this collection of teams and throw a schedule together and everybody's going to say, well, that's equal, fair, and balanced, because it's just somebody's going to have a beef with everything because their schedule is going to be, in their opinion, harder than somebody else's schedule. Now, I will say this.
And they'll be right.
Yeah, and they're right. And this league is cyclical. What you can't do is you can't look at it if you're the SEC and try to figure it out balanced right now. Because here's the thing. What does school X look like in 5 years?
Yep.
Okay, let's take Alabama, for example. What do they look like if Nick Saban's not their coach? Okay, I'm not saying Alabama can't win. Alabama fans, don't. That's not my point. But my point is you're going to be different, right? 5 years ago, 6 years ago, everybody was okay with Mark Richt on their schedule. Yeah, Georgia had a lot of talent, but they weren't Kirby Smart. They weren't that kind of program at that point. So you can't look at it short-sighted. You can't worry about the fair and the balance for what 24 looks like or 25 looks like. These are long-term decisions that you're making, which is why I think you got to protect rivalries, and I think you've got to be smart about it and not get caught up so much in, wow, these teams are really good right now. Because, hey, newsflash, there's a lot of people that would have taken Tennessee on their schedule the last 10 years that didn't want Tennessee on their schedule in the 90s or the early 2000s. It's a cyclical cycle. I mean, you're going to go up and down. Everybody in this league has proven through time that that's what happens.
A lot of people are asking, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? Well, money makes the world go round. For the 2021-2022 academic fiscal year, the revenue split in the Southeastern Conference of the 14 teams, it just came out a couple of days ago, $49.9 million. Now, it was a little bit higher last year, but at like 54, I believe, and that depends on a lot of different things like the college football playoffs. Anybody want to venture what the expected revenue split's going to be in the Southeastern Conference with 16 teams?
And the new TV contract.
Anybody want to guess?
Million.
How much?
$78 million.
Close. According to what I can find, $70 million in expected revenue split amongst the 16 SEC teams.
Which is why the SEC said, yeah, we're open to expansion. And Texas and Oklahoma went, take me. Please put me in the league, because they're not getting that kind of money out of the Big 12.
And people were asking why. Well, this is dumb. Why is UCLA? Why is USC going from the Pac-12 to the Big 10? Makes no sense. UCLA split a couple years ago in terms of the Pac-12 revenue split. They got like $28 million. They're like, take me. I don't care. Frequent flyer miles. I'll go. I'll play. It's all about the money.
That's pretty wild. They're basically, doubling Rob's annual income. Pretty wild.
Almost. I will say
SEC would make sense. The Big Ten's a tough sell. That's hard. I know the money's there. I mean, that is a clear money grab. Whereas Texas and the SEC is not the most far-fetched idea, unlike USC in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, you've already got a school there. I mean, your conference already has a school in that league. You've got Oklahoma's a border state, with a couple of conference members. I will say, back to the 6-3 thing, I think the only fair and equitable way to do it, I think you should just let Jimmy Sexton pick it. Just have him draw it up.
Josh Heupel's going to wish he would have taken that deal and signed that contract to have him as his agent then, because who knows what that thing might look like.
Times are changing. College athletics, college football, and right here in the Southeastern Conference 2024, Tennessee will officially welcome Texas and Oklahoma for football. And there's going to be more money all around, and it's going to look completely different. No divisions, likely a 9th conference game, and 3 permanent opponents. Who will those 3 permanent opponents be? We'll find out at some point over the spring, and moving forward, it'll look good. Tennessee basketball trying to bounce back. It's got a tough sled this week. Alabama at home and then Kentucky on the road. And Gus Manning, what a life, 99 years of age, a VFL in every sense of the phrase there. That has been the Volquest podcast. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, hanging out with us here today. Austin Price, Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, I'm Eric Kane. Big thanks to our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions for making this possible. And a big thank you. We'll see you on Thursday for the mailbag edition of the Volquest podcast.